Okay, thank you. Morning, Jill. Can we start, Lindy?
Yes, Sonam.
Great.
Please.
Okay, now I can hear you clearly.
It comes and goes. I'm so sorry for that. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. If you are trying to say something, Jill, I think you're muted at the moment, probably, so we can't hear you.
Jill's just left a message in the chat. That's good.
Yep.
Usual way. I couldn't connect in the usual manner, so I don't know. Maybe other people might be having a problem too. I don't know.
I can hear you. Well, so you are somewhere, Jill, traveling?
Oh, I'm in Hobart again now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So thank you. Good morning, and thank you for joining Sutra study. Okay, so we'll get started, and so I'm going to share the screen, my colorful screen as usual. I hope you will see the text. Okay, I'll try at least and see where we go. Okay, view. Oh, it's full screen, so this is not full screen. Yep. Okay, what happened? Yeah. No, that's it. You need to be there. Oh, yeah. So, okay. So, I think we have in a previous session, we looked at actually partly a basic ethics distinction, ethical distinction, or the ethical questions, especially the criteria of what distinguishes virtuous actions from vicious actions, and the consequences of conducting or behaving virtuously or behaving viciously. So, and quite a detailed description we will later see as a result, and also previously, virtuous actions always give rise to pleasant consequences, and therefore birth in the form of human realm as well as in gods. Vicious actions, depending on the gravity of actions, of course, give rise to various consequences, including being born in mostly in the unfortunate realms. Now, these realms, I think, although we can think of them as kind of actual place in cosmological sense or a geographical sense, but mostly from presenting from this text point of view, it's basically psychological. And that's why I remember Buddha made it so clear that actually it's a perspective. This whole thing can be presented from the experiential standpoint of an advanced meditator. So meditator living in the present moment, present life, can also go through all this, those process, heavenly as well as heavenly in the terms of or as a result of performing virtuous actions, and hellish life as a result of performing or entertaining vicious actions. So negative thoughts always give rise to those destructive experiences, whereas positive thoughts always gives rise to pleasant experience. So that's the, I think, gist of what we discussed. Now, from here on, basically, I think the more important task is how do you literally go deeper and understand and handle. So if it is true that those actions, vicious actions, always brings us suffering, and also, let's say, virtuous actions also, yeah, kind of pleasant experience, but still you are kind of kept in the trapped in the samsara, which is still, I think, cyclic and therefore so suffering. How do you deal with this moral problem or moral issue? How do you resolve it deeply? So that's why I think meditation becomes a very important part. So the question that in chapter 2, of course, in chapter 2 is one of the richest. I think it is a very interesting and a very, I think, very important. So we're going to go a little slowly, and I might not jump a lot here and try to actually. There are certain sections that are being repeated, so that's, I think we can kind of move on a little bit faster. But other sections we may better off just taking them slowly and thinking through. So the first question that is being asked here, I mean, you can see the description is the chapter name, or why this chapter name is given. On the one hand, yes, it's all about health and starving spirits, but it's about much, from the philosophical, from the sociological, or from meditative standpoint, it's actually much more significant than just a description of hells and heavens, right? So the first question is, how does a monk who gradually relinquishes defilements first keep up unvirtuous qualities so as to cultivate the qualities of a virtue? Yes, in this case here you can see it's a one step. It's not the ultimate aim is not to attain liberation or enlightenment. Actually, the ultimate aim is to relinquish oneself from the birth or from the possible birth of unfortunate realms. Because if we avoid those non-virtuous or vicious actions, and if you take Buddha's account or Buddha's moral stories seriously, then what we can prevent in the next life is actually the possibility of being reborn in one of those unfortunate realms, namely in the form of animals, hungry ghosts, or hellish hell beings. So those can be prevented. Those rebirths can be prevented by relinquishing those actions that actually lead to corresponding results. Okay, so that's the question being put here. Spiritual practitioners who carefully observe inner phenomena. Now, this is important. So essentially, we are meditating, because after all, you have to ask this question: how do you address this problem when you're meditating? It is not like a sociological activity. You go into the society and pick up the survey and try to understand their mentality and then give them advice. No, this advice, sort of literary advice, is not going to work. Here we have to individually deal with our own habits of mind that are usually responsible for the vicious actions or unvirtuous actions. So then the question is, how do you address it deeply? And that you have to address it deeply through meditation. And for this reason, one has to carefully observe inner phenomena of the mind, mental thoughts. So when you sit, and last time, of course, remember this is the whole discussion is about it's mindfulness. 4 types of mindfulness. This whole text is about 4 types of mindfulness. And mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of mental content. Now they have translated as mindfulness of inner phenomena. That's okay, but it's basically Dhamma Anupassana. That's in Pali. Dhamma means observation or mindfulness of mental thoughts, or mindfulness of thoughts, right? Dhamma Anupassana. So when you and then mindfulness of sensation, and which will come a little later and go fairly deep, and mindfulness of the body, which is the last, which the text discusses at the very end, mindfulness of body. But the question is, you cannot even begin to meditate on the mindfulness of your thought unless you actually experience what is happening in your brain. Because after all, when you are mindfully aware of what is happening in your head, you need to actually feel what is happening in your head. Otherwise, you will be imagining, and that's imagination or visualization is not a part of it. Because here you need to see, observe. And when you need to see and observe, you literally have to feel the wrath of those thoughts. So when you sit and sit very quietly, and your mind is not reacting to anything external, so there is no external stimulus coming. But what happened? The rages of your thoughts will come. The monkey mind. Text describes as a monkey mind, and that will come. And sometimes anger, sometimes hatred, sometimes passion. Those things are dominant. For the meditators in the beginning, those thoughts are mostly dominant, particularly to do with the passion. One's attachment, they just always on the surface because they are most forceful. They'll come up first, and then let's say if you are dealing with so much of anger and hatred, yeah, that might be the dominant. But generally, for a normal healthy person, when you meditate, the obvious thing that comes up is passion all the time. And when those passionate thoughts arises, you will start seeing the object that is also the things that you are passionate about. Namely, if it is sexual, you will see literally sexual objects, whether male, female, doesn't matter, but because the passions are patient. So anything that you fixated, people tend to see them. These are important because meditator is now going to use those experiences to stop getting trapped into those thoughts. Now, if we get trapped into thoughts, then there is no way to avoid unvirtuous actions. Those are unvirtuous actions in the sense that because we get trapped. For this reason, of course, when meditator very carefully observes, and then maintain equanimity, understanding those thoughts arising, passing, arising, passing. That's the wisdom of impermanence. And you literally, later on, gradually, the strength of those thoughts will become less and less. So that's the context here I'm basically mentioning here. Spiritual practitioners who carefully observe their inner phenomena see by means of knowledge derived from hearing or from divine eye. So most preferable is to develop the divine eye. You yourself, we ourselves as a meditator, needs to develop this faculty. Divine eye is a basically refined form of mental consciousness. When mental consciousness is not refined, then it tend to react and always tend to engage with the external object through reactively. But when mental consciousness becomes much more, let's say, fine-tuned, and then it becomes settled and economous, then it's literally, you could say, within even your eyes are closed, you might see things. Of course, you won't be seeing things that you see through your eyes, because these are two ways of seeing. But that divine eye, the reason why it is called divine eye is God's supposed to have that kind of eye. But it's not visual. It is not eye of the visual faculty. It is a mental. And that's why it is usually technical term is divine eye or a divine ear. And then you may not have the sound here, but when that mind becomes so attuned with the reality, maintained with a perfect equanimity, then what happens is also you will, through the divine ear, start hearing sounds. And mostly the sounds, especially if you are actually, if your meditation is involved with a blissful sensation, yeah, you will start different devas ringing drums and things like that. Anyway, that's not a big deal, but so that divine eye is very important. And remember, this cultivation is just natural. Meditator needs to sit and meditate and observe nature, phenomena, thoughts arising, passing, with the strong basis of calm abiding. Shamatha is important. With a very strong shamatha, then before the introduction of vipassana, or even with the introduction of vipassana, you will see that you gradually are able to start seeing things as if your whole head is taking off, and you start even you will be able to see what is happening almost at the back of your head, because the eye, the divine eye, does not depend on depends on the flesh or this faculty that you have, the so-called vision. Okay, so what happens that such a monk initially will think as follows: mutually serving as a causes and conditions, these objects and faculties have since beginning its time caused, I'm reading this section, cause beings to remain within and wander throughout the cyclic existence. This is the cause of birth. Now say, so here, of course, until here you can see, yes, those thoughts, we may sometimes, we may attribute to our physical action as the most responsible for generating action-oriented, result-oriented actions, but it actually mostly is driven by thoughts, because whether physical actions or vocal actions, they're all mostly, almost all of them are driven by thoughts. Our actions, whether virtuous or non-virtuous, always have to kind of first arise in the thought, and then with that intention we carry out or execute those thoughts. So that's why it becomes the thoughts are the causes of those things, causes of our the main cause of our own samsara. So that's why this is the cause of birth, namely that realization deeply. Because at the moment we basically conceptually know, we think that yes, there has to be a certain reason why we are here. We can conceptually understand or rationally understand. But to see the link experientially within your own head, how is these negative thoughts and the negative or negative experience of pain as related on the physical level, that's a difficult thing. So that's why observation, when we observe it, you literally see the causal link between the cause and the effect. So that's why thoughts are formed in relation to ocean of subjects, objects, and so these thoughts, these inner factors and objective factors cause beings to wander. In other words, so you could ask, why do thoughts arise? Well, thoughts arises as a reaction to the objects of senses, or senses, and those sense objects with the sound, the color, shape, tactility, the feeling, the things that you taste or things that you smell, all these things, what we call sensory objects, becomes the food for our thought to arise. So when thought react with a certain object, then they would trigger more thoughts. And those thoughts, because they are repetitive and because they are reactive, most of the time not understanding the nature of objects, they tend to generate similar action. Mostly keep us fixated in the samsara. With such thought in the mind, he will first of all give rise to a great sense of joy in relation to places. So now, of course, monk, in this case a monk or a nun or a meditator, whoever the meditator is, once he or she realizes, the main problem of my own samsara and the suffering is my own thoughts. So then, because you're no longer actually listening to a scripture, or you're not listening to a teacher, but you're actually, when you start observing your own mind, you're able to see it directly. And when you see it directly, what triggers you is basically this enormous sense of joy and happiness. For the solitude, okay, so now you see the problem, and then you also know what the solution is. Solutions go deeper and understand that thing. So then, in order to get mastery of one's thoughts, about this, what we called familiarization with the monkey and taming the monkey mind. Because after all, it is untamed thoughts that grasp on any objects, always grasping for anything that is pleasant or anything that is negative, unpleasant. So there is always reaction going on, and it is this reaction that actually keeps us trapped. So then the question is, how do you stop that reactive mind? And that's the taming of the monkey mind. So then, of course, text goes in details about delighted in solitude, he will develop an inspired mind with no aspiration, appreciation for the fun. So that's what happens. Naturally, you withdraw. Now, this withdrawal is not a withdrawal of, sort of depression or withdrawing from the society because of the lack of motivation. No, because now we know the priority. What is the priority for my own mental health? Priority for my future. And the priority is not go outside into the world and address the problem, because that you cannot address. It's all about the problem is in within us in the end. So then the approach has to be also within. So therefore, instead of being inspired by objects, having lots of funs and parties, taking hash and that, taking joy in that, one starts taking joy in the solitude. Because after all, in the solitude, you can starve senses. And when the senses are starved, your what we called vasanas, or the previous habits that you have cultivated in your life, not only this life, at least from Buddhist and thousand millions of life, they'll start coming up. Because you're not, so if your senses are always exposed bombarded with the external senses, external objects, or the things that you see, then your mental habits, the impressions that you have deeply supplanted, they don't get opportunity to come up. So when you sit in the solitude, isolated place, that's one of the main reasons why isolated place, quiet place are important, because the senses don't get usual stimulus. And when the senses don't get usual stimulus for the meditator, what happens when you start observing your mind again and again, then mind started chewing, mind started consuming the old mental habits, what we called karmas, the previous karmas that you have collected, and they will start coming up on the surface. And that's the moment, basically purification. When you start dealing with them, that's the only moment when purification starts. Otherwise, there is no purification. It's, in fact, creating more and more karma. So that's important, because that's why solitude and being inspired, so which means no attraction is required, games, cities, because then you got plenty. Now, if you sit and meditate, yes, if you, let's say, when you sit and meditate, as I said previously, passionate objects will come up. Passions and so much of joy, objects of everything, you will see them, literally. Viscerally, you will see the object that you are passionate about. If it is sexual almost like pornographic to the clarity. Even you could say the clarity is much more. But when you look through those objects visually, there's a certain barrier. But when you see it internally with your own, what you call divine eye, the mind clearly, it becomes even more intense, very intense. So then if your mind is not calm, quiet, if your mind is not very stable and particularly economous, and very importantly, if your mind cannot understand the flux nature of that pleasant, unpleasant, then you will not be able to maintain your shila, namely stability. Shila, when I'm talking about shila, the ethics, especially the sexual energy inside the body, it'll just come out automatically for both the male and female, because the joy of that, the rapture that these objects produce are so intense. And then if you don't have a very stable mind, very stable, grounded mind, and then if you cannot also understand the flux, constant changing, arising, passing nature of those very, very powerful imagery objects, or the experiences inside body, body energy automatically comes out. So that's why one of the most dangerous thing for the meditator is lose that, because these are, and that's one of the main reasons why celibacy is so important, because you learn how to control that energy and then later on use it. So what happens is when you start seeing those objects and it becomes so intense, and then that intensity, if you're able to use it, understanding the flux changing nature, then it becomes such a powerful force for purification. Otherwise, if you lose your energy at that point, if you're, let's put it in more mundane term, if you ejaculate, male or female, I don't know if there's something called female ejaculation, maybe there is one, at that, in the meditative state, you will lose, almost like feel as if that you have sort of up here and then you fall on the ground. everything becomes dark at that point. Because before that, everything's so lucid, so clear, mind is so powerful. And because the ecstasy is so strong, because objects that you see, especially, let's say, things that you're attached to, if you are, let's say, your childhood, if you, what do you call it in English? The object that you kind of always fancy. If you're male, you fancy certain person, certain female, or if you're female, you may certain fancy throughout life, fancy a certain person, and that kind of thing will come up and can become very, very, on the one hand, when they come up in your mind and you start seeing them visually, viscerally, they become so strong. They can be very strong and powerful antidote against the desire. But at the same time, because it's so powerful, it can easily victimize us and make our meditation very, let's say, the stability of mind can be, very shaken because we lose this mental balance. And you see it, and because we have been obsessing that thing for our life, and not in this life, probably in the past, or who knows. And that obsession can come up so viscerally. For this reason, wisdom is so important. And impermanence is so important. If you visualize that, oh no, this is empty, there is no self, just intellectually, if you think about it, no, that's not going to be strong enough, enough deterrent. So what you need is deterrent for deterrent forces, actually sitting there and you feel as if everything is at constant flux. And when you see the whole constant flux, and then even the sort of joy, you will see that your whatever object comes in, you actually, meditation becomes stronger and stronger, because and that's gradually, that's how the process of purification starts. Because now, as if you have lit your fire, gas, you've got a huge gas, and if you have lit the fire on the top, and those gas can come out, because there's a fire, and that fire can consume the gas, and the gas is the past sankharas, past karmas, and they can come up continuously, and they can constantly consume because of the wisdom of impermanence. But if you don't have the wisdom of impermanence, arising, passing, then yeah, thing can very easily slip, and you can go back literally from the first scratch. So that's why samadhi. Now you see the samadhi, concentration, sila ethics, or solidity, or the solid ethics is important, and then wisdom, all coming together at this point. Now, for this reason, so he says he will not look at females in front of him, and he has no interest in mundane business, for the monk I'm talking about here. But and those who pursue them, because after all, now everything is inside. Literally, everything is inside. You don't need a person outside to sort of give that joy. In a sense, there is already. As he gives up those two, his mind will become one-pointed, joyous, and buoyant. Thus, he will initially think, how should I first compose and take hold of my mind? So, taking hold of my mind and staying composed and balanced, that becomes so fundamental. And it turns out, what gives the greatest composure and balance initially is the knowledge of impermanence. And the impermanence is the seeing of the arising of the sensation, passing away of the sensation, arising, passing away continuously. That's what we call it, impermanence. And from that, actually, you will notice that knowledge of anatta, non-self, emptiness, all are grounded in that knowledge. Okay. So once you have set up this, then you enter in the first ground, and this is where the fun begins. At this point, he will understand the mind's engagement with what is virtuous, unvirtuous, neutral in terms of 18 categories of discernment. So there are three things, right? So you're still observing your mind. When you say observing your mind, basically you could say what is the focus is your brain at this point, and there are three things. There are three things that is happening. One is virtuous, namely virtuous thoughts, and unvirtuous thoughts, and neutral thoughts. And associated with neutral thoughts, unvirtuous thoughts, unpleasant experience, associated with pleasant experiences, unpleasant body experience, and the neutral thoughts, these are neutral experience. So there are range of thoughts happening, and they have the associated what you call a physical sensation. And we will talk about physical sensation deliberately in the next section. But with respect to 18 categories, so 18 categories are what we call dhatus, sometimes considered as 18 objects of cognition, or if you like, domain of knowledge. So what are those 18? Well, those 18, think about, six sensory organs, right? Six sensory organs, starting with the eye, nose, tongue, body, ear, and the mind. Did I have six? Yep. So if you have these six sensory faculties, then those six sensory faculties, each of them have corresponding objects. So eyes with the color, shape, what we call form, ears with the sound, nose with the smell, tongue with the taste, body with the tactility, and mind with the mental thoughts. So you got these those 12, right? What they call these 12 are called, in a technical Buddhist term, ayatanas. They are called sources. 12 sources sometimes, 12 domains of objects. So you got each 5 sensory organs, and then corresponding six sensory organs with the 6 sensory objects. Now, when these two come together, when they contact each other, right, then each of them will give rise to 6 sensory consciousness. So then from when the eye and the form comes in contact with each other, they give rise to what we call eye consciousness. So when I see your image, on the screen, that gives rise to the vision, because there was no vision before. When I look at it, when I have when my healthy eyes look at the image, then actually I see that seeing is called vision, visual consciousness. So visual consciousness arises when these two visual faculty and visual objects come together. There's a contact. Okay. In the same way, then sound and ear cognition comes together. You got ear consciousness, likewise nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mental consciousness. So you got 18. These are the only objects from Buddhist standpoint. These are the only things that we need to take care of. Nothing else. Nothing else in the universe matters. No, that's why. So those objects, 6 objects, 6 different types of faculties, and 6 different types of consciousness that rise from. To know is to know those 18 different categories. And if you know them fully, you become Buddha. You become omniscient. So in a sense, it's kind of easy. Of course, easy to say and easy to enumerate. But of course, task is much more difficult. So that's why if the monk, a meditator, knows, and remember, all these experiences are inside. Because remember, when you see an object, the vision arises here. Now, for a monk, actually, at the moment, eyes are closed. He is not hearing sound outside. He's not touching any objects, said there is no tactility. And he is not sort of thinking or imagining anything. But so then you could say, what are the social objects? It's all inside, because it's Tibetan word is pakcha, or vasanas, the impressions, the deep karmas that you have stored, what called storage, storehouse consciousness, and they comes up just like the old gas tank. We have full of gas in our tank, where we have accumulated those gas tank for billions of years, and those gas tanks are our own karmas, and they shape our personality, they shape our future, everything, because it's our own karma, right? They are the designer. Our karma's designer, future, have been designing this life, designing the pathway, whether it is joyful, unjoyful. Everything is responsible for karma. And we itself created karma. So when you meditate and basically starve your consciousness with external stimulus, those karma will start coming up. Just like the gas. If you lit the gas and let the fire, otherwise dangerous. If you just open the gas tank, and if there's no fire consuming it, then it will blow up or leave a very unpleasant smell. We know the dangerous nature of the gas. But if that gas is being consumed by the wisdom of impermanence, wisdom anicca, anatta, then that gas can continually come up. And this is exactly what is the structure of purification, path of purification. Because otherwise, and that's, you'll see any surface level purification is going to be surface level. Deeper levels purification requires that kind of structure. Okay, so when you do, how do you develop this purification process? Is because using those, what do you call 18, in this case, 18 categories or 18 domain of knowledge. So how? Beginning with what are those 18? He will think, and you can translate it. She will think, when forms appear to the eyes and are appreciated the mind, that is afflictive. Hence, such an event leads to the experience of ripening unvirtuous factors. So what happens? When you meditate again, or sometimes even if you are not meditating, if you're outside, of course, if you can do that. But in this case, this monk is already, or a meditator is already in a very isolated, secluded place. So there are no sources of the external stimulus. Now, those forms that he or she is seeing divinely from the past karma. So the forms are seeing either beautiful objects or unpleasant objects, all due to one's own karma. They're coming up. So that's why he says, okay. And especially these afflictive, very unpleasant, very, let's say, ugly objects, very scary figures, when they come up, they are not, you are not seeing them with the eyes. You are seeing them with your, divine eyes at this point. Divine eyes means literally meditative mental consciousness. You are seeing them. And because they are seeing, you are seeing them, and because they are generated from the past karma, and you will see, and if you maintain equanimity, mental composure, that becomes a process of purification. Because now you have open the gas tank, but you allow it, but also your fire of observation or fire of knowledge, understanding as it is, with keeping your mind balanced, because that is present. Then it becomes a process of purification. So when the forms appear to the eyes and appreciated by the mind, is that are appreciated the mind, that is afflictive. Appreciated of the mind, but that is afflictive. Usually in the process, ordinarily, if you are not meditating, if you are not meditator, you will have the reverse. What you will do, you will create karma. Instead of dismantling karma, you will create karma when there is something unpleasant. You will not appreciate it. On the contrary, you will hate it. And if you hate it, you create more and more reaction, and that means you will be creating more and more karma. Instead of clearing your karma, you would end up creating more karma. But now the context is different. You are sitting, meditating, and reflectively, non-reactively, you're allowing it, and you'll see very unpleasant figures comes out, unpleasant pictures, very dangerous objects, sort of very scary one, spooky one, coming up, or very, let's say, literally like a very, if it is due with a passion, almost like a very passionate objects, very beautiful objects, or things that attract you. But because you are not reactive, because you are not, your mind is not reacting at this point, you're just simply observing, understanding its nature. What happens? And even leads to the experience of ripening of unvirtuous factors, right? Ripening of why ripening, why not creating new, because you are not reacting. Otherwise, you would be creating new, and when you are creating new karma, there is no opportunity for the old karmas that you are already, the stock cannot ripe. So that's why what happens is when you're meditating, and then when the karma comes up, and then they ripe. When they ripe, you will start seeing things. There is no physical objects. There is no eyes are not open. And when they ripe, you will start seeing things, object as a result of the past karma. And this is important because after all, every stock has to be completely empty, entirely empty, in order for one to be liberated from the lower level of sort of unfortunate realms of the birth. So if you have one stock, there is still possibility you could be reborn in the any unfortunate realm. But that stock has to be entirely finished, or in other words, gas tank has to be completely empty. You have to empty it. It's not going to happen naturally. It without wisdom, that is without wisdom of impermanence or anatta or anicca, that gas is not going to open up. In fact, it will create more and more bigger tank, because that's that's why we will be creating more new karmas, right? So now we are not creating new, and that's why meditator. We are not creating new. In fact, we are, the whole process is ripening, clearing off. In order to do that, that's of course what happens. So you use, now here, how do you use what you're using? You're using literally unpleasant experience to ripe your past negative karma, to bring up, to clear off the negative karma or destructive karma, vicious karma that we have accumulated. You are using unpleasant experience. And because you are not hating it, you are literally observing it and without reaction. And so that's what happens. Thus, there will be a ripening of, okay. So that's the first one. The second one happens, now that's the first technique, right? First method. The second method, on the other hand, when forms appear and become source of mental displeasure, right? Mental displeasure, there is a freedom from desire. So now what happens? There is a freedom from desire. Usually when there's a desirable object arises, you like it, we like it, we not only like it, we want it more and more. That's the nature of the desirable object. So in ordinary world, that's what happens when you see a certain object, very attractive object, very pleasant. We want to literally obsess it. We want to get it. We want to reach out and get it. But this time, meditator sits there. It's almost like displeasure. But that displeasure is not the displeasure of the hate. That displeasure is not of the displeasure of what you call reaction. That displeasure is literally not consuming it with a pleasure, because if it does, then you would end up creating karma. What happens? Because when there's so much of happiness, like let's say very joyful, pleasant experience, when we create karma, we react with wanting more. But this time, no, you are not reacting with wanting more. You just simply observe, and little bit, almost like the sense of displeasure. You now this sense pleasurable, or maybe it's desirable objects no longer hold on you, attract you, and therefore it cannot entice you any longer. When that happens, literally there's a sort of mental displeasure, and that displeasure freezes you from the desire. Okay, so for this right, that's the second most important second most important technique. You use your thoughts, unpleasant or unpleasant object that you visually see, when you desirable object that you see, beautiful objects, whatever object that you see, and then instead of allowing your desire to arise, you just observe, and almost like there is a sense of kind of not wanting it. And that not wanting it is so important for us to free ourselves for the sense of obsessiveness. Okay, so that's the second most important technique. And then third, the neutral, right? Remember, there's neutral sensation, neutral object, neither pleasant nor unpleasant sort of object. Finally, when the forms are registered as neutral, that will bring about the ripening of indeterminate factors. What are the indeterminate factors? Again, indeterminate karma that we have created in the past. So sometimes we create karma because of the pleasant nature of the objects. Sometimes people may create karma because of unpleasant nature of object. But then sometimes the objects can be registered as neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, and there you got almost like sense of apathy and you leave them. But for a meditator, if you really want to come out and become completely free, one need to understand and also clear away those karmas. Now, how do you do that? You exactly use that neutral object. Ordinarily, in the ordinary world, we become a victim of reacting to neutral objects. But now, for a meditator, you actually make it so that you can be empowered to come out from the apathy. So you become much more sensitive, and you don't actually allow karma of indeterminate factors to be created. So that will bring about the ripening of indeterminate factors. So now, if you understood this with respect to physical forms, right? Forms with respect to the visual or the things that you can see, then you can apply the same formula with respect to sound, because there are 3 different types of sound that you can hear: pleasant sound, unpleasant sound, and neutral sound. Pleasant sound, ordinarily we would be attracted, and we create karma because of the desire. But for the meditator, pleasant sound becomes a very good object so that they can come out from the desire. Neutral, unpleasant sound becomes a very good object so that they can come out, certainly from the anger or aversion or hatred towards unpleasant objects, right? And the neutral, same thing. Neutral by using neutral sound, they can come out from the indeterminate action that we have created in the past. So then, what happens? You got already so from 4th, right? Sounds that is pleasant, appreciated by mind. 5th, the sound that is displeased with the sound. And then 6th, the mind that is also not reacting, and comprehending the neutral nature of the sound. So you got literally 6 formulas to deal with the things that you see. For the meditator, this is extremely important. So that's why in totality, you go the 18 different ways in which meditator can come out and clear away all the karmas of the past. With respect to the sound of the form in the beginning, color, shape. Form is kind of 2 types, right? You got form is constituted as defined as color or shape, things that you visually see, and then the sound, and then the taste, the smell with the nose, and the taste with the tongue, and then the tactility with the body, and the mental phenomena. So collectively, because collectively you have those 16 different ways in which meditator can empower himself or herself. Ordinarily, in the samsara, we become the victim of those 18 different 18 categories. But for the meditator now, you use exactly the same categories, exactly the same form, sound, things that you actually experience. But instead of allowing them to manipulate us, allowing us to be possessed or become a victim, the meditator needs to come above so that we can be free from the samskara or the karma. As a result, this is how you empty your gas tank. In ordinary world, we fill a gas tank of karma because of reacting those 16 different objects. But meditator, what the meditator does is you use them exactly, those, three different ways of experiencing sound, three different ways of experiencing taste, three different ways of experiencing smell, three different ways of experiencing tactility, three different ways of experiencing mental thoughts. You use them exactly, and then turns out that they become a tool for our freedom. In the ordinary world, they become tool for our victims, so that we actually end up trapped in the samsara, because our gas tank is so big that you just cannot have a freedom, because everything's so heavy. Because it just, and now what happens? The gas tank is too big, there's no freedom. And that's why we just caught in the samsara, and then vicious again and again. So this, as I see it, is actually one of the beautiful way the meditator does. And now you can actually repeat, as long as you got the first three formula with respect to form. If you understand it, that how it works, apply the same, exactly the same with respect to every other categories of the 16, and you will understand what is happening. Any question? I think, okay, I'll just leave you here for a little while, because I think it's a, okay, let's see if there is, yeah. Now, so after having done all that, sorry, oh yeah, 16, I was talking about 16, so you go to 17, 18, so 18, after having done all the process, now you can see, remember, meditator takes care of literally very cautiously, very carefully observe everything, right? Don't leave anything. So in Buddhism, there is no mysticism. Every mysticism has to be completely dismantled, and everything has to be brought into clear light. Everything has to be clear as crystal, because that's what we call knowledge. That's what we call enlightenment. If there is a certain mystery that is unknown, that is mystical, that cannot be addressed, there is some problem. So that mystification needs to be completely demystified. Once having done that, then thus the birth and death within the cycle of existence occurs in terms of those 18 categories of discernment. Now I'm reading 2.5, right? So if you read this, that's actually very nicely summarized. Now meditator knows exactly now what is happening. So you don't have to rely on the thick scriptures. You don't have to rely on certain teachers' words. Basically, you read your biology. You read what is happening in your mind. You read your experience. You observe how experience occurs one after the other. If you react, there is another causation of samsara. If you don't react, there is a causation that is to do with the causation of freedom. So now meditator knows exactly how that happens. Whenever a monk perceives these 18 forms of discernment, the terrestrial one, not only monk becomes so happy, and of course he becomes free. Now even the gods become so happy, and then what happens? Now we more read the whole thing later on. Of course, it's a text being repeated, but this is quite interesting. Monk, then discernment and the terrestrial yakshas will rejoice deeply and convey this news to the celestial yakshas. Think them as a aliens. Those aliens become so delighted for the fact that there is a very mature meditator. He is basically, this mature meditator is now waging war against Maras, and he or she has become victorious. So that's why even the gods tend to come and celebrate with the monk, with the nun. Delighted terrestrial and celestial yakshas will further pass the news to the 4 great kings. Remember, the 4 great kings are the king of dharmas, dharma rajas, usually the protector of God, protector of dharmas, Buddhist teachings. So they get informed, and what happens when they get informed, who will receive it with the deep appreciation? The 4 great kings will in turn tell the gods in their realm in the Jambudvipa, a noble son who's, now this is how they tell. In Jambudvipa, this is somehow in India. Jambudvipa usually refers to India, but it could happen in Tasmania. It could happen anywhere else, okay? Jambudvipa son who is, or a daughter who is such and such a village, town, area, family has a shaven of his hair or her hair and bared, donned the saffron robes, and with faith gone forth from the household to become homeless mendicant. Now, this is how in the ancient time, because exactly, usually it's the mendicant, but then there are thousands of course, fully liberated monks and nuns during the time of Buddha who are lay people, right? So even they are full arahants. He has understood and directly perceived the 18 forms of discernment and is now delighted in exclusion and undivided peace, a practice. So because of that, and then when the gods of the realm of 4 great kings hear this message from the king, they will feel great joy and think the forces of Maras are waning, the forces of the Sacred Dharma are on the rise. So that's why the gods even celebrate. Now, at the moment, if you don't believe, fine, perfectly fine. Just leave them as some sort of side issue. For meditator, at a certain point, the time will arrive when you start seeing things, experiencing things that you would not ordinarily experience. Then, of course, at that moment, you might say, oh yeah, actually, surprise. At that point, you can pick that up. You might be surprised, because if you don't meditate, even the whole process would not make no sense, because it's all about not in the scientific world at the moment. Scientific studies, I don't know. I don't know if people believe in this kind of thing. If your senses are starved, I suppose they should believe, right? If your body is stopped giving food, then your will start consuming all fats and meat and everything. That's the natural thing. Buddha's teaching say exactly the same thing with the mind. If you starve mind with the food, usually the color, shape, and those things, the things that you react, then it start consuming the past talk, and the past talks are karmas that we have created. And when you start consuming, they will arise naturally. And that's important because that. So somebody's saying. Where's my text? I lost my text. Yes. Okay, so then what does it say? The gods realm. Okay, understood. Seen the 18 great. Thus, Koshuka rule of the gods. This is basically the ruler of God. Will be the deep vibration receive this news from the gods of the realm. So usually, this is what happens in the text. You'll see, monk meditates and understand, reach a certain threshold, maybe achieve a milestone in the modern day jargon, kind of milestone, and those gods start celebrating with so much of joy, and then they spread the news. We may not necessarily at the moment believe in such a thing, but I think for a meditator, if you leave our mind open, things you will get to from your own experience. I think there are certain things that would make no sense at this point scientifically, but when you go deeper in your mind, when your mind start opening up, there are certain surprises, a lot of surprises on the way, and one of which is this devas, and because after all, remember, these are and you might experience not only that, and you will see, okay, yeah, it makes kind of sense. All right, so any questions at this point? We are stopping when, Lindy? Is it?
About 10 to 11, 10:50.
Okay.
Yeah.
50. All right. So we still got a bit of time.
Yeah.
But any questions at this point? I think we went to a very. I mean, this is to me, it's. And when we think from the practical, from meditative standpoint, it's one of those. Because usually people talk about in Buddhist texts, people talk about the purification, this and that. Yeah, a very important project. But but this text actually makes it so sort of explicit and makes it so simple. The way you do it, and it makes a logical sense too. It is not spiritual practice sometimes in the West, particularly. I suppose in the West, when you think about Western religion, let's say, I'm thinking especially with Christianity or Islam, or if faith is dominant, because it is mostly the faith that you follow and everything is taken care of literally. But in Buddhism, unfortunately, there is nobody who takes care of. You need to take care of the world if you want. And that means, how do you take care of? Understanding, knowledge, really perceiving and meditation, working hard. That actually lays this text lays out this foundation, why we really need to observe, understand things deeply, not just on the superficial level. Why deeply? Because if you don't see those things, that say color that comes in your vision, if you don't see it changing, that can entice you. That can captivate you. That would make you more obsessive. And then the moment when you actually see the color, and remember, this color is not outside. This color is inside. Meditative because it's an internally, what do we call, ripening of the past karma. Now it starts. Your eyes are closed. You don't see sound here. But you are seeing things from within, what you call divine eyes. And those colors, if you don't look deeply, if you don't see them changing, and next thing you will notice is, yes, the changing nature. First thing is arising. That's the first moment of impermanence. If you have not understood that, if you have never seen that, we have no understanding of impermanence. We can make all sorts of claim of impermanence, anicca, anatta, or in fact emptiness. But if you haven't got there, or even, let's say, if you haven't seen how things arise, we haven't actually understood we haven't taken the first step. Now, the danger of not taking that step is then when you see something very attractive, right? Deeply attractive, especially the things that you fancy, it becomes so, what's the word? Intoxicating. And when you get intoxicated because of the picture that you're seeing inside, unfortunately, karma is created. And that's become trap. But when you see it's arising, and then keep observing, and next moment you will notice actually it's passing away, changing, arising, passing away, arising, passing away. And then you keep observing, it arises, passes away very quickly. And you keep observing, it just passes away, passes all the time, disintegrating all the time. And then at that moment, when you see this deeply, of course, mind does not get obsessed. Mind does not. And then you'll see, as a result, the karma is ripened, but you are not creating karma, and those stocks of karma can come up, So tanks, or maybe, I don't know, all the stocks of karma can constantly come up, and you consume them. The one that consumes is your own wisdom, right? Basically, it's like the lamp, the fire on the top that consumes the gas, and it just consumes completely. There's no odor, smell in the house. If it fails, I mean, usually, of course, in the ordinary world, sometimes people have what you call post-traumatic stress disorder or something, and then they become the victim of the post-traumatic stress. Here, you're using the same formula. You are literally bringing that up. You are bringing your all the traumas that you experienced or joys that you experienced, bringing up, but you don't allow yourself to become a victim because you maintain the equanimity. Make sure that your mind is so sort of stable, and for that, Shila is fundamentally important. If you learn how to master the energy, that gives the stability and the clarity. And then not only that, you actually start seeing the change. So I think these are, in that sense, I think deeply insightful and deeply inspiring. Anyway, so I said enough. Questions?
Yeah, Jill here. Yeah, I find that my most difficult thing is my grandchildren live in Sydney, and I'm meditating, and I'm fine with letting go of maybe anger with my partner, towards my partner, or something like that, and obviously negative, direction. But then the attractive thing for me is thinking the images of my 3 young granddaughters come in my mind, and because I love them so much and everything, I don't feel inclined to make them empty
Very good
or
example.
impermanent.
Yeah, thank you. Very good example. Yeah. That's the nature of actually those attractive objects. Now, of course, let's look at this let's say, not personally, dispassionately. So what happens? All right. I mean, of course, at the moment they give enormous joy, and you tend to celebrate. That's fine. Almost like, and looks like that is perfectly fine to celebrate it. But then that celebration, if that's just a celebration and there's nothing, no, let's say, what you call other repercussion, then that would be fine. Almost like you took the first step and you enjoy, and that's it. Things are okay. But the problem usually, at least in this case, is that has two sides. Very attractive because you love them so much. When you see them, you see the photos, it gives so much of sort of literal strength. It gives you the reason to live, reason to rise from the bed. But that's one side. And exactly because of the same reason, when they are not away, when they are away from you, you become it becomes so much of sorrow. Yeah, it will give you so much of sorrow. So same attractive objects, when it becomes available to you, it gives you so much almost like gives you strength. But these, when they are not there any longer, and one day when you will have to leave them, it does not become a source of your strength. It becomes a source of literally make you very weak as a result, because you will have to, in a certain sense. So either they will need to say you goodbye, or you will need to say goodbye, because this is the impermanent nature of the world. Unfortunately, we cannot be together all the time. That loved ones have to somehow come to separate at a certain point. But there are, of course, other ways of staying together, and the spiritual way of staying together. But generally, when we stay together, it's almost like when they are available, they become a source of inspiration, source of joy. But then when they are not available, they become bring so much of suffering. In this life, I'm talking about only this life. But what is worse is, at least trying from the Buddhist standpoint, it creates so much of karma as a result. Why karma? Because we are reacting with so much of attachment to the things, that the color, shape, and the object that gives rise. And then unfortunately, later on it comes back. So that's why sort of the solution here in a sense is, yes, you can literally, you don't have to deny them. You can totally accept them as they are. In fact, appreciate them as they are objectively. That's the Buddha's way. And how do you do that? Is literally resolving oneself, understanding the person, and usually solving it within oneself. So then you can have your loved ones, your children or your partner. You don't have to run away from them, because these are ordinary lay people. It's perfectly fine. All we need to do is address the problem psychologically. When you address the problem psychologically, when you become psychologically free from one's own obsession, you don't have to get rid of the person. Don't have to say, go away. The person can be there. And Now, what you actually end up doing is you can give this person a complete independence. Why I mean by complete independence? This person can go on or in whatever he likes, they can do, and you can kind of appreciate them. At the moment, what happens is when you have so much of attachment to them, we want to make them do the things that we like, because we tend to, so when they do something that we like, oh, we celebrate them. When they tend to do something what we don't like, then we tend to become sort of, let's say, dismissive, or we want to run away from them. This is because we don't allow them to live the life that they need independently. So Buddha's way is, no, external objects, fine, they can exist in any way they like. Your freedom does not lie in eliminating your children, grandchildren, your partner, anything like that. No, they can be with you perfectly fine. But the internal freedom Buddhist talks about is the psychological freedom that one can address within oneself. And when we do, then when you are living, you can live with a smiling face. You celebrate them, you help them any way you like. And of course, then the love that you will have towards your grandchildren is going to be one-way street. Why one-way street? Because you don't have attachment to them. You don't have any expectation over them. At the moment, ordinarily, we have so much of expectation towards them, and that if they don't meet our expectation, then our love kind of diminishes. What Buddha says is, Buddha's solution is radical. He would say, make sure that we don't have any attachment to deep obsession or expectation to our loved ones, whether it's our spouses or relations. It's a difficult one, of course, we can understand that. But if we deal with the attachment inside, and then at a certain point, even your loved ones come and kick you, or come and do things that is counter to your interests, you will still keep loving them. And not only that, Buddha's way is, and that's how Buddha sometimes is described as a person unaccompanied friends of all. And that's why, of course, you can be friend. Usually, all in the sense, you can be friend with the people who you have associated with. And who knows, you make a lot, and ends up making a lot more enemies among them too. But then, because Buddha's idea is actually, if you master yourself, set yourself free, we can also set others free. So then let them. Of course, we won't, in a sense, we would still care them deeply, and we would want to see them flourish. But if they do so-called obnoxious things, if you fail to meet our expectations, we will not be depressed as a result, or take it personally, because no attachment. So yeah, I think there are two sides of the things in this case. One side is that one thing that you need to address deeply, personally, because it's disempowering. Because especially when my loved one, for example, in my case, the only person that I have deeply familiarized, deeply associated with my life is my wife. My family, all of them in Tibet, kind of literally unknown, very little connection. So there is no deep sort of. So yes, sometimes now at the moment she's in US. So it's a moment when I think, okay, what sort of life without your loved one? Or time will come when the loved one, both of us, one day will have to, even though we loved each other so much, one day, life is as such that you have to, one will leave the other. So then what is going to be to the other person? That's a very important. And then, as I'm also trying to, as a meditator, a meditation student, trying to address this and take this in the very personal level, deeply, not just Buddhist teaching, but from the ordinary standpoint. Yes, I think the more I grow in Dhamma, the more I become stronger. And then doesn't matter now if she goes, I don't feel sort of deep loss. And then my ultimate aim in the life is almost like, and this I think supposed to be also, you know, generally the goal of for the most of the Buddhists is that you allow this person, if you really love the person, you give this person the ultimate freedom he or she deserves, not restricting to and to make this person satisfy my interest of desire. So yes, I think I'm sort of making all this kind of nonsensical or circular point, but I think there are lots of issues that needs to be dealt with. And yes, partly Buddha's teaching is all about making you stronger while giving the other person complete independence, but at the same time making you so sensitive, so concerned about the person, your loved ones, so that your love stays one-way street. At the moment, our love is called a two-way, because as long as that's the problem of attachment. So when we have attachment, as long as our expectations are met, our love stays. As long as expectations not met, then our love sort of seems to fly away. And Buddha's idea is, how do you strengthen your love without having any expectation? And now, of course, the solution starts not with the other person, but within oneself. So in other words, how can I make, let's say, how can I use these tools, pleasant and unpleasant experience in my body? So when you have so much of unpleasant experience on your body, how do you make you stronger rather than becoming weaker? Right. I mean, the color, shape, sound, things that you see, or things that when you sit and meditate. I mean, most of us probably meditate at a certain point in your house, and everything is quiet and nice, and things start coming from inside, right? Lots of thoughts start coming from inside. And at a certain point, when you go deeper, you will see the color of those thoughts, shape of those thoughts, sound of those thoughts. And that's what I call divine eye, to put it differently. And then, of course, I think, so handling them, learning how to handle them is literally to make us stronger. And when we become stronger, our ability to deal with the person, the loved ones, as well as not so loved ones, people who come to harm you, will be, I mean, the relationship or the dynamic, Buddha's teaching basically is to literally strengthen that dynamic so that we don't hate anyone. We don't privilege any existence. So that's why you become sort of literally equal friends, Kalyan Mitra for all the beings. Anyway, thank you, Jill, for, I think that's a very relevant and I think example that you raise up, which actually has raises a lot of issues, but I think there are also a potential sort of, because if you really don't understand, there seems to be so much of conflict and a problem. But I think hopefully that the solution that text gives us some way helps to address a certain sort of problem. Any questions?
So could I ask, in the text, can you just define what the term, I think it was indiscriminate factors. I think it was with the neutral.
Indeterminate, indeterminate factor.
So what exactly is that covering?
Yeah, remember there are three types of experiences. We all know that those three types of experience that Buddhist texts all talk about. And those experiences, corresponding to those experiences, we create three types of karma, right? So with respect of, so the three types of experiences: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, right? So any objects can have those. It could be sound, shade, it could be tactility, it could be thoughts. Some of them are pleasant, others unpleasant, and some are neutral, so that we just don't give much importance, or we just ignore them. Now, that ignoring them doesn't go unaddressed. That ignoring or sort of just, okay, I don't care. No, it does. From Buddhist point of view, that's why I said nothing is literally, you cannot leave anything unturned. Table, everything, every stone needs to be turned and look and see. What happens in the case where your pleasant experiences address, unpleasant address, and then these neutral experiences, because neutral experiences are so sort of like a gray area, because it doesn't give you suffering, it doesn't give you joy, you just don't care, just leave them. But this still gives enough psychological, mental reaction to create what we call indifferent karmas. Indifferent karmas, remember, karma has now, okay, with a positive, with a pleasant experience, what sort of karma do we create? Pleasant experience, if you attach to a pleasant experience,
Negative karma.
What about unpleasant experience?
Negative karma.
Negative karma.
Always negative.
What about positive karma? Can we create positive karma? You celebrate with your let's say your child, grandchildren, and things like that. So remember, okay, usually with a pleasant experience, we create positive karma, what called white karma, or wholesome karma. Because if something gives you happiness, something is happiness, you tend, of course, you are attached. So there's a desire, but the desire, it does not necessarily lead to, destruction or destructions of life and things like that. In some sense, it does. But generally, of course, the formula is pleasant experience gives rise to pleasant karma, namely positive karma. Unpleasant experience gives rise to negative or destructive karma, and the neutral sensation gives rise to indifferent karma. So indifferent factor in the text, indifferent karma is basically karma that is neither wholesome nor unwholesome. It's kind of in between. It's bits here and bit there. The problem is this kind of karma is usually created because of ignorance. Much of them is ignorance, because you are not so clear or aware about what is its nature. So therefore, we usually tend to ignore them, much of it. But for the meditator, when you sit and observe, yes, there are moments when you get sort of pleasant experience. It's very very visible and observable. Unpleasant experience, even more visible. And unpleasant experience is easier to deal with, because you know it's unpleasant, so unpleasant, and you become very careful. You become extra cautious, especially when there's so much of, let's say, unpleasant object that you see. You will, if you become angry, hateful, you are reacting, and karma is being created. So you know how to be careful. But if there's so much of happiness, so much of pleasant experience, we forget that. We forget, and then we get addicted to it, and we almost like wanting more and more. And Buddha describes sometimes that kind of experience as very, very dangerous, because it is very addictive, almost like, so unless you really understand impermanence, they become very addictive. Third type of experience is much more kind of dangerous, and that is the danger of neutral experience. Because it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Sometimes it's kind of blissfully oblivious, and you may completely ignore it. You may not pay any attention, and as a result, it creates mostly the karma from ignorance, because you are not giving any attention. But for the meditator, you will definitely make very clear distinction of those three, because neutral experience can stay for a very, very long time. And sometimes meditation manuals will describe it's a kind of, sometimes people get very bored of that kind of experience. It can continue years and years. But the most important thing for the meditator is whether it is a pleasant experience, unpleasant experience, neutral experience, you must make them as a tool so that you can clear away your past karma. So if you react with this unpleasant or neutral karma, again you will end up creating indifferent karma in the karmic stock, and that becomes a source of trap. So that's what it means in the text. In other words, the formula basically is all about using your own three types of experience. In the mundane world, we become victim of those experiences. And that's why we are trapped in the samsara. It's because of experience. Because of pleasant experience, we become obsessively attached to them, and attachment keeps us trapped. Unpleasant experience, we obsessively hate them, and they keep us trapped. Neutral experience, because we just don't completely ignore them, they trap us through ignorance. Now, if you are meditative, we want to use those three experiences, but exactly the reverse technique needs to be needed. And in order to reverse the process, you need to understand unpleasant experience as it is, pleasant experience as it is, neutral experience as it is. With that mind, then when you approach, then they become solution. And when they become solution, you start consuming karma, past karma, and then karma clearing or karma purification, karmic purification starts. Okay, other question?
I had a question on section 2.4 that I think you just answered. It says that when the mind reacts with displeasure, the context is one of purification, and there will be ripening of virtuous factors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you. That was perfect.
Yes, I think, because usually in the ordinary world, when I don't like this word spiritual, because I think there's something wrong with it. Because I too think, I don't see, for a practitioner, I don't see any difference between, in fact, the scientific approach and Buddhist approach, particularly the way I approach things. For me, everything needs to be observed with open eyes. You cannot let pass anything just out of your vision. Everything needs to be observed. With this observation, the things become clearer. And then when you observe things with the visual objects or sound and those things, then and of course, and that's why the most important method in Buddhist teaching is knowing things how they are, right? So if we don't know them, without knowing them, we react. And when we react without knowing them, we create karma. And we create karma. When we create karma, well, karma is basically psychological reaction. So if you find some desirable object, because you react and you want more and more. The reason why we want more and more, because we really don't know the true nature of the object. If you really know the true nature of object, that object is constantly arising, passing, changing, then the sense of wanting basically automatically diminishes, right? Becomes less and less. And then later on, as a result, knowledge or the direct awareness, and that's why this whole text is about mindfulness. Mindfulness or awareness, building awareness with respect to those. Today we talk about those 18 different categories. And if you look deeply, awareness is at the very heart. Awareness with respect to pleasant experience, awareness with respect to the neutral experience or unpleasant experience. And it is when we have the awareness inbuilt as a process of observing, then they becomes a part of solution. And of course, then there are very different degrees of awareness. The first thing that you notice is the degree of the impermanence. Even within the impermanence, there are at least 3 or 4 different stages. And the first degree of impermanence is you notice that when you sit and meditate, first thing you notice is your experience arise, constant arise, and you don't notice it passing away in the first phase. Keep meditating, and it could take years, sometimes it could months, depending on the seriousness of your meditation. And then you gradually notice, yes, it arises, stays a little bit, and then changes. Arises, stays a little bit, and changes. Keep you meditating, and then you'll notice arises, passes away, arises, passes away. So the whole experience, whether pleasant and unpleasant, they're all characterized by the same thing. And then if you keep observing, that change becomes faster, changing faster, arises straight away, changes, arises straight away, changes. The reason why mind becomes at that point free from obsession is because naturally, when you notice that even this very pleasant, full of blissful experience, sensation changes, arises, changes, then mind automatically loses its grip or sort of from the obsessiveness. You don't have to do it. It's almost like it's not that you make a decision, no, I'm not going to be attached. No, that's a very surface level sort of decision. But the change we need to make is this intuitive grasp, attachment, obsessiveness, and that will automatically go as the more and more familiar you become with the changing nature of things. And later on, when you start looking inside, your totality of being is nothing but changing. And my example, sometimes when you drive 120 meters, 120 kilometer on the road, highway. If you look the road in front of you, how fast that goes, you will notice exactly the nature of your whole totality of being. There's nothing that stays a moment, everything fast. And at a certain point, it will go faster, right? And that's what called changing nature. And then if you understand things like that from your own direct experience, then whether pleasant, unpleasant, nothing can be, you can literally, there's no point. It's not that you are making a rational decision, mind automatically releases yourself. And that release is being free. It's literally setting us free from obsessive nature with that desirable objects or undesirable objects. So usually we tend to think undesirable objects, you don't want them, you hate them, but then as long as we have the hatred, that keeps us bound. So yes, I think this, if you understand this formula that is put out in the first ground, I think it gives a good sort of post or good stage to move further, because then later on when you move further, yes, the text will specifically talk about the changing nature of sensation, because you are going deeper and deeper. At the moment, and the text did not explicitly mention about the wisdom, the change, impermanence, but text will bring about those things. But it does mention, clearly about the distinction between purification and karma making. When you make, it's a karma making mental process and purifying mental process, the differences usually kind of can be slim. Pleasant experience is exactly the same. Unpleasant exactly the same. You're seeing the same object, but the way you see them is the different, and that's why one creates karma, the other clears away the karma. So it's all about awareness, and how, and then not only the awareness but also the psychological, the context which informs that awareness. Okay, any further question? I think we went into a very important section, and then please keep reading next, at least maybe to the third ground. I'm not sure whether we'll get to the third ground in the next discussion, because the second ground is a very, very significant one, and so we might get stuck there for some time. I think it's a very important, especially we are talking about Dhamma Anupassana, mindfulness of mind and mindfulness of mental content. Because you're meditating, you're seeing objects, you're hearing sound, you are almost like tasting the food, even though eyes are closed. Meditating, you're isolated in the meditation cave. Maybe, let's say 1 month, 20 days, you stop all your senses, but it just internal karma start coming up, rising up, because you are not exposed to the sense data. So that gives a very good opportunity for the past karma to come up. And when they come up, you need to literally clear them off. In order to clear them off, remember, you need to turn on that gas tanker. The gas tanker needs to open, because then it starts coming out the gas. But if you just open without the wisdom, that could create a whole hell lot of, and that's what happens. I see sometimes people actually start suffering past traumatic experiences, and because they don't have this wisdom in front of them, unfortunately, they become victim of their past experience. But in this case now, you need to literally allow your past experience to come forward. But at the same time, because when you observe objectively with the balanced mind, you don't allow your mind to be victimized. In fact, you past negativities, you have to sort of clear them away, and that I think is a very delicate part of meditation, but nevertheless very important.
Thank you so much, Sonam.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
We are literally run out of time now.
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming, starting a little bit earlier this week and finishing a little bit earlier, so that we can, because we have another program with Geshe Sherb starting at 11 a.m. in our program today. So thank you for accommodating that for us, Sonam, today. And maybe I can complete with the dedication. Would that be okay?
Sure.
It's with Shantideva's dedication today.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Please do.
Okay. May all beings everywhere be plagued by sufferings. May all beings everywhere plagued by sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms, and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the misery of the world. So thank you very much, Sonam, and we look forward to next month, and I'll be in touch with you about hosting that for the coming month. And thank you everybody for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonam.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lindy.
Thank you, Sonam.
Okay.
I'm happy that you guys are able to make it. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll see you.